Thanks to the chairperson for your kind introductions. Today I will be talking about zoonotic malaria, an often overlooked yet increasingly important form of malaria that is transmitted from non-human primate to humans. Malaria remains a major global health threat, with WHO reports estimating around 282 million cases and 610,000 deaths in 2024. It is a mosquito-borne infectious disease which is caused by Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium malaria, Plasmodium ovale, and Plasmodium noosei.
For decades, malaria has been viewed as a strictly human disease transmitted from one person to another by Anopheles mosquitoes. However, this assumption is no longer sufficient. Plasmodium noosei is a malaria parasite that is found naturally in long-tailed, pigtail macaques, and bender-leaf monkeys in tropical forests of Malaysia and Southeast Asia. The life cycle continues in the monkeys through Anopheles mosquito. Humans become infected when this mosquito bites a human. Thus far, several Anopheles mosquito species belonging to the leucovirus group have been incriminated as vectors for noosei malaria.
In Malaysia, since the malaria eradication program was implemented in 1961, total malaria cases decreased dramatically. However, Plasmodium noosei infection notification increased yearly since 2004. To date, noosei infections have been dominating the infectious rate of other species.
Malaysia reported zero indigenous human malaria since 2018 until today. However, we failed to obtain the WHO malaria-free certificate due to 1,000 cases of P. noosei infections yearly.
Today, zoonotic malaria has emerged as a growing public health concern, particularly in regions where human vectors and wildlife increasingly overlap in Southeast Asia. Apart from being the predominant species, Plasmodium noosei infection can be asymptomatic and submicroscopic. These potentially play a role as a silent carrier or reservoir and can contribute to disease transmissions. In addition to P. noosei, 6 other non-human primate malaria species have historically been transmitted to humans under experimental conditions via infected mosquito bites. This indicates their potential for natural zoonotic transmission to humans. Through PCR and high-throughput DNA sequencing, more zoonotic species have been discovered that can transmit from non-human primate to humans naturally. A few species that have been shown so far include Plasmodium simoi, which was reported in Brazil in 1966, and more other species such as Plasmodium cynomogae, Plasmodium inui, cotnyai, and semi-ovale have also been reported in Malaysia.
Among these zoonotic infections, Plasmodium cynomogae has also been widely reported. The first natural infections of human cynomogae was reported in Hulu, Terengganu in 2011. Subsequent years, more cynomogae infections have been reported in Southeast Asia, including a case imported to Denmark from Peninsula and Thailand, and 2 more mono-infections in patients in Thailand. Most of these patients were asymptomatic or having mild infections.
Another zoonotic species, Plasmodium inui infections, have also been reported in Malaysia and Thailand. In Malaysia, most of these zoonotic transmissions share the same natural host with Plasmodium noosei, particularly the long-tailed macaques and the pigtail macaques. Microscopy remains the gold standard for malaria diagnosis. However, Plasmodium noosei infections is commonly misdiagnosed as other species due to morphological similarities. It is very hard to diagnose a zoonotic species by microscopy. In the case of P. norsi, the morphologies of the early trophozoite are identical to those of falciparams. The rest of the blood stage of P. norsi resemble P. malariae. Rapid diagnostic tests (RDTs) are widely available for malaria diagnosis, offer point-of-care testing with rapid results within 15 minutes. These are very cost-effective. However, the limit of detection is higher than 100 parasites per microliters. These tests contain antibodies, usually specific to P. falciparams and P. vivax, and they're also specific for all the malaria species, which is pan-malaria species. However, all the commercially available RTT were developed way before P. norsi were discovered, and therefore they were not optimized for detecting P. norsi or other zoonotic infections. Most of the time, these tests can detect P. norsi infections as P. falciparum or P. vivax or pan-malaria species, depends on the test kit used. Therefore, molecular techniques target at parasite DNA or RNA are used as a commonly used method to detect and differentiate the zoonotic infections. They exhibit high sensitivity and specificity for all species, and this method has been shown to be effectively detecting all humans and non-human primate species by targeting at different genes, especially the 18S rRNA genes, which is multiple copies and conserved among different species. Therefore, it is widely used in molecular technique.
Polymerase chain reaction (PCR) is a molecular technique which takes about 3 to 6 hours to complete. It requires a thermocycler to complete the reactions, and then the result will be viewed under gel documentation systems on the agarose gel. Many PCR methods have been developed to detect malaria. Some can detect single species at one go. Some PCR, we call them as a multiplex PCR, can target as multiple species at one go.
Other than one-step PCR, there are also nested PCR which require 2 rounds of amplifications, typically take about 6 hours to complete. Due to its high sensitivity and specificity, it has been used as a reference molecular test for malaria diagnosis.
Nested PCR has been developed for the detections of all humans and non-human primate species.
Real-time PCR is another method that can be used to detect the malaria infections. The amplification can be monitored real-time, thus the result can be observed at the real-time on the computers, and it is highly specific and fast. However, it requires a very costly real-time PCR machine. These are the targeted genes that have been developed for real-time PCR. There's also multiplex real-time PCR, which takes about 2 hours to perform, targeting as different genes and can detect multiple infections at one time. This table summarizes the advantages and disadvantages of each test. As mentioned, microscopy and RTT both have low sensitivity, and it could not detect low parasitemia or asymptomatic infections. Although RTT is rapid, 15 minutes, it is not specific for all zoonotic malaria species. Nested PCR and real-time PCR can specifically detect all species with high sensitivity. However, these methods are costly and it requires expensive equipment. And for nested PCR, the turnaround time is 6 hours, which is too lengthy for rapid diagnosis. Alternative molecular methods that does not require thermocycler is therefore needed. Recombinase polymerase amplification is an isothermal DNA amplification technique that functions at low temperatures, about 37 degrees, and it can produce results in 10 to 20 minutes, which is very fast. This method eliminates the need for expensive PCR machines because it's run at isothermal, which is one single temperatures. It just needs a simple incubator to perform the test. However, the test is a bit costly because it involves 3 enzymes to perform the test.
Several RPA assays have been developed targeting at 18S rRNA genes for P. cynomolgi and P. nosai.
Most recently, another isothermal technique, SLAM, has also been developed, which require about 62 to 65 degrees, and it can produce a result in 30 to 60 minutes. Same with RPA, it does not require a PCR machine, it just requires a simple incubators. And the enzyme used in this case is cheaper compared to RPA. LAMP can also be detected using 3 methods: color changes, or it can be loaded on the lateral flow device to look at the bands forming on the lateral flow device, and it can also be observed using a real-time turbidity meter.
Different lamps assays have been developed using color reagents and lateral flow device. In summary, most molecular techniques offer high sensitivity, detecting at least one parasite per microliter. Although some require expensive PCR machine, such as real-time PCR, and RPA and LAMP require just an incubator and provide a rapid alternative, combines high sensitivity. Among them, LAMP being the most cost-effective. With proper optimization, LAMP could potentially be used as point-of-care testing at bedside, according to WHO standard. An ideal point-of-care diagnostic must fulfill the assured criteria for point-of-care, where LAMP can be easily adapted. It should be affordable, sensitive, specific, user-friendly, rapid, easy to use, and it can be delivered to resource-limited environment. Zoonotic malaria, such as Plasmodium nosai and Plasmodium cynomolgi infections, both symptomatic and asymptomatic, are reported throughout endemic regions of Southeast Asia. Most of these infections involve low parasitemia, with an unknown proportion falling below the detection limit of routine microscopy. Thus, accurate identification of this emergent zoonotic disease, where other human Plasmodium species are also present, is essential to understand the true geographical distribution of zoonotic infections and for improving regional estimations of the disease burden. Enhancing the capacity of national malaria control programs to detect and report zoonotic malaria infections is very important, as the control strategy for these zoonotic species differ significantly from those targeting other humans' malaria parasites. Conventional diagnostic methods, such as microscopy and rapid diagnostic tests, have limited sensitivity and specificity, particularly for detecting low-level submicroscopic infections, which poses a challenge for active malaria surveillance. Thus, molecular surveillance tools can overcome this limitation by improving the limit of detections and provide greater accuracy in diagnosing zoonotic malaria. Among these, real-time PCR is highly useful in central facilities where resources and technical capacity are available. However, on the other hand, LAMP is also particularly useful for rural or resource-limited settings, enabling sensitive and rapid detection of malaria without the need of sophisticated laboratory infrastructures. With this, molecular approaches can enhance both surveillance and diagnostic accuracy for emergent zoonotic Plasmodium species. Future research should focus on optimizing molecular diagnostic methods for zoonotic malaria, since this is the only solution. This includes developing protocols that can minimize contamination risks, since molecular techniques are highly sensitive, and also to simplify the DNA extraction procedure, and at last to identify ways to stabilize reagent for safe transportation to remote areas, as most of these enzymes are actually temperature sensitive. Additionally, it is also important to assess the feasibility of implementing molecular tests as a point of care setting and to establish robust criteria for their validations. Finally, research should explore strategy for the seamless integrations of new diagnostic tools into existing point of care workflows, ensuring that this innovation enhance malaria surveillance and patient care without disrupting current diagnostic practices. These are the references used in this presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I hope we have enough time for Q&A.